What is next, my friend, for the Seattle Mariners? And will Eugenio Suarez sign anytime soon?
They are a team that needs a bat. And I believe Adam Jude was on FT yesterday explaining that since the end of the season, they've lost Suarez, they've lost Polanco, and they've re-signed Josh Naylor, but they haven't done anything else really to address their offense. So where would that bat be? Most likely in the infield, it seems to me, but their concern there is blocking some younger players. So this is why they have had such interest in Brendan Donovan, because they feel Brendan Donovan is a guy that they can use in a variety of ways at a variety of positions and therefore enable some of their younger players the opportunity to establish themselves. That makes a ton of sense, and yet they've been talking about Brendan Donovan with the Cardinals all winter, and yet we have not seen a deal yet.
No, Brendan Donovan might never get traded. He might be a free agent before he gets traded at the pace this trade's going, Ken. It's been crazy. I've been talking about this guy for 3 months about him getting traded. He's about to be traded, and he's still a Cardinal. So we'll see him in Jupiter in March. So, Brendan, I expect you to come on the show. Thank you. Ken, why do we keep hearing about all these prospects? Like, we don't want to block this guy. We don't want to block that guy. If you can get an established major league player, every team is just so afraid to block a guy that they don't even know. Christian Campbell. I use Christian Campbell. He was not blocked. They signed him to an extension, and he spent most of the year in AAA. And now this year, guess what? They're trying to see if he can even make the roster, even though he's a guaranteed. So why are we so scared to trade away our prospects for guaranteed big leagues?
Well, I don't know about necessarily trading them, or are you talking more about just creating opportunity for them? That
Both.
seems
It's
to be
just
what you're
both.
saying.
It's kind of a both thing,
Okay.
right?
AJ, you're right that an established player is more likely to help you win than a non-established player. But the way teams view this, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, the prospects, the young players are affordable. They're under control for longer than an established guy you might sign for 2 years, and therefore they provide more bang for the buck. The flaw in that theory is when it doesn't work, just as you just mentioned with Christian Campbell. They give him a big contract right after he starts the season, and yet he wasn't ready for the majors. He kind of demonstrated that he wasn't ready for the majors, and who knows, they could have maybe committed that money to a player of a veteran status and waited to see if Christian Campbell actually can be a viable major leaguer. They obviously got the price they wanted in the extension. They signed him, and then it didn't work out. Now, for every Christian Campbell, there's also a Roman Anthony, a top prospect who does work out. And the Mariners have a number of these guys: Cole Young, Colt Emerson, others that are coming. And they have some of the more highly regarded young players in the game today. That's why they don't want to block them. I understand that logic, but they still need one more player at the very least.
The Red Sox are clearly in a win now, don't hoard the prospects mode, but it's a little bit different for the Red Sox. You feel like, and a lot of people feel like, they need to fill a spot in the infield. Whether it is Christian Campbell or not, we doubt it. Are teams looking at the Red Sox pitching, which they have added to this offseason, and then maybe could diminish from to be able to make sure they fill that role that Bregman left?
They definitely want to add an infielder, and probably a right-handed hitting infielder. Their preference seems to be second base because they want Marcelo Meyer at third. Now, I've heard in recent days that they are willing to trade one of their lesser pitchers. And by lesser pitcher, not a guy who's a top prospect and not a guy who is Garrett Crochet or Sonny Gray or Johan Oviedo. That crowd, obviously Ranger Suarez fits with that as well. So who are we talking about? Brian Bayo is one. Jordan Hicks is another. Maybe Patrick Sandoval coming off Tommy John surgery would be another in that kind of category. They don't want to trade Peyton Toley. They don't want to trade Connolly early. I understand that. And if they can get the piece they need for one of the lesser pitchers, or maybe just rearrange it in some fashion, make a couple of deals to get that player, that infielder, more power to them. They need to do that, in my opinion. It's kind of like Seattle. They're missing one piece, and it's an important piece because offensively, they are a little bit challenged right now, at least from an outside perspective. Now, maybe they feel, well, we've got run prevention figured out better with the pitching staff we've assembled. They certainly have a very deep rotation at this point, perhaps even too deep. But you got to score runs too, and that's the area they still need to address.
Coming out of Minnesota, that the Minnesota Twins and Derek Falvey, the president of baseball operations as well as business operations, have mutually agreed to part ways. The timing seems interesting, but I'd like your take on it.
The timing sure was interesting, Alanna, and I know you just had Dan Hayes on, and he, of course, covers that team so well for The Athletic. Derek Falvey, from what I gathered, was frustrated. Frustrated because at the deadline, he was asked by ownership to go even further than he might have gone if just left to his own devices. And as Dan mentioned in the previous segment, I believe, or a couple of segments ago, they tore apart their bullpen, the entire bullpen, even some guys who were under long-term control who were cheap, like the players we were just talking about with AJ. And it left them in a competitively compromised position. So now they have effectively a new ownership structure. Tom Pohlad is now in charge. He wasn't the guy before. It was Jim Pohlad. They brought in some minority investors. Things are changing there in terms of what ownership sees and what ownership looks like. So Falvey, it seemed to me, just was wary and maybe frustrated and maybe just uncertain about the direction of this team. He is the one who fought to keep this team together over the winter and not trade Joe Ryan, not trade Byron Buxton. Obviously, ownership agreed with that, and that's the way they're going forward. But I don't know how he sees the future, and maybe he doesn't see the future quite the same way that ownership does. That would be my strong guess here. When you have a mutual parting, what else could it be?
Chris Bassitt, can you tell us about what his market is starting to shape up like? Because this is a guy that had a bounce back season, and we've seen other guys who have bad seasons right before free agency not get jobs. But now Chris Bassitt, and he did really well in the playoffs too. Why is it not materialized, and what are you hearing so far?
Well, the market for starting pitching right now is quite interesting. There are a number of teams still that need to add a starter, and you can see the pitchers right now who are still available. And then beyond Framber Valdez and Zac Gallen, you see that list. Lucas Giolito, Chris Bassitt, Zach Littell, they're all on the rung below. So it seems to me they perhaps, and I say perhaps, need Framber Valdez and Zac Gallen to find their spots. And at that point, we would see better definition in the markets for the next tier down. And those are the pitchers I just mentioned. It's Giolito, it's Bassitt, it's Zach Littell, Nick Martinez, a couple of others as well. So that seems to be what's going on. And you might ask, well, what are we doing here? It's January 30th. Spring training camps open in 2 weeks, even less in some cases. Why are these pitchers not signed? It seems to me it's pretty obvious. The teams are squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, hoping for these guys to lower their prices, particularly the top two, Valdez and Gallen. And then they'll have still a high supply and still a high demand, but maybe they can get prices closer to what they want.